As clinicians, we know that technology has the potential to support independence in older adults. Voice assistants like Alexa can provide medication reminders. Routines can be pre programmed to ensure nighttime safety, to lock all the doors and turn off the lights. But here's the problem: the Achilles heel of smart homes is their dependency on Wi Fi. Smart homes don't work if the Wi Fi gets disconnected during a software update, or if a specific device is no longer supported by the app. When you combine this with the need to create a physical infrastructure for smart home technology to work in, the hassle factor goes up tremendously, especially for the adult child who will likely be the one installing the products and then having to be 24/7 tech support. So, is there a baby step option that could make the transition to using technology in the home less painful? To answer this question, I'm thrilled to be joined today by Dhaval Patel from Lotus, who's here to share ideas on how a person could benefit from technology without the tangled temperamental hassle of Wi Fi and the need for labor intensive installation. But first, a disclosure. Before we begin, we'd like to note that today's guest, Dhaval Patel, is the founder of Lotus Labs. While this episode will explore a range of technology solutions related to smart home technology, we want to be transparent that one or more of the solutions discussed is associated with the guest company. Our goal is to provide balanced educational content, and other product types and considerations will also be discussed. And now, back to our conversation. Welcome to Innovative Aging, a podcast for clinicians who want to stay creative, stay informed, and stay connected to what's possible. I'm your host, Carol Chiang, an occupational therapist with 27 years of experience in rehab and home-based care. I know how hard clinicians work to keep their clients aging safely, whether that means hacking together solutions, testing new products, or thinking 3 steps ahead. If you're passionate about helping your clients function better, but just don't have the time to keep up with all the latest solutions, this podcast is for you. On Innovative Aging, you'll hear practical, energizing conversations with experts in rehab, design, and innovation that can spark fresh ideas you can bring back to the people you serve. Together, we can rethink what it means to age well at home and lead the way in shaping the future of aging. Let's dive in. Welcome, Dhaval. So glad to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to be with us.
Of course, Carol. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So to kick things off, let's just start with a quick introduction. I'd love it if you could tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you were inspired to create a product that was recognized recently as one of Time Magazine's best inventions of 2025.
You're too kind. Well, I am an electrical and aerospace engineer by training, so a nerd. Before this, I used to manage a division at Apple for iPhone, Watch, and AirPods. And really, this journey of Lotus started because of my own pain point. So me and my brother were both born with twisted knees. And so as a result, over the years, I've been on and off crutches a lot. Now, one night, a couple years ago in this house, I had just gotten into bed at the end of a long day, but forgot to turn off my ceiling lights. Now, I was too tired to climb out of my bed, hop onto my crutches, hop the 10 feet, turn off the light, hobble back 10 feet, and get back into bed. So I just slept with the lights on the entire night and woke up in the morning thinking, well, if someone like me, an electrical engineer working at Apple, and funnily enough, before Apple, I worked at the company that makes the wall switches at Lutron. If someone like me didn't even have smart home technology in their own home, what about everyone else? Especially everyone else that's more vulnerable. And so how could I make something that potentially solved my own problem, but also help everybody else? And that was the genesis.
I love that. I love that. And small comparison to this, but I have smart home technology, of course, in my house, and I'm so used to being able to just turn off the lights with one thing. I get all cozy and everything and then turn off the lights. Well, it is such a shock when I am traveling and I'm in a hotel and I get cozy and I'm all ready to go, and then I realize, darn it, I have to get up to turn off the lights. This is awful. It feels like an archaic time for me. So I very much think that having options like yours could be very beneficial. So that might be my next addition to my travel luggage.
Well, happy to have it. And actually, on a very real note, we had a Thanksgiving trip recently, and me and my wife, who's now pregnant, we went to an Airbnb and we ended up using Lotus over there. So just as a quick refresher for those of you who don't know, Lotus is a wearable ring that controls objects at home by pointing, but there's no app, no Wi-Fi, and no rewiring needed. And so, yeah, Carol, to your point, we were using it in the Airbnb, and so I can completely empathize. Very recently too.
Yeah, and those travel things actually are a very big area that I always discuss because I don't think that aging in place should be in the home. I really think you
Right.
need to be getting out, going to see people, staying with family,
Absolutely.
visiting the world, and finding solutions that can go with you is really important. It's not even just for convenience, like turning off the lights. It's safety. So it kind of brings me to, the reason why I love like looking at technologies like this because my goal when I'm recommending technology is always to decrease the risk of falls. And I have had many times walking into those hotel rooms thinking, I can't believe the light switch is on the other side of the hotel room and I need to walk in the dark all the way there to get there. And so to a point where I've even counseled people to say bring your own night lights with batteries, just stick them in there and yes, you may forget them, but that's a lot better than spending a night in the ER in a place that is not your home. Um, I'm just curious about, all of the user feedback that you've gotten. I know you're really big into, talking to people, finding out what their pain points are, and I've heard you say that, the design all came from those discussions, which I absolutely love because it's very much this partnership collaboration that I think that produces really good products that people really love. And I'm wondering if fall prevention has been listed as a motivation for people to use your product. Have you seen that as a main pain point for people trying to solve?
Yeah, I would say the three biggest buckets of feedback, if you will, that we've gotten. The number one reason that people love Lotus is primarily to reduce the risk of falls. That's probably the first big reason. The second big bucket is reducing time and effort associated with doing daily activities, specifically activities of daily living. And the third, and probably the closest, most emotional need, is just not having to ask for help. It's an independence and a
Mm.
dignity thing that after a while, the smaller the thing you're asking for help for, the more it feels less dignified. And so, probably the most emotional reason is to not having to ask for help. So, those are the three big buckets. But you're right. It actually, funnily enough, the product didn't come out thinking of falls, even though that's the number one reason now. To your point, we follow this human centered design process. It's a very fancy word of saying, don't make assumptions. That's basically it. You're not allowed to make assumptions. So everything, even the smallest choices you're considering making, talk to somebody about it. Ask them about their lived experience. And so you're right. Everything started off with the reverse order, which is I don't want to ask for help. I want to spend less time and effort doing things I have to do every day. And funnily enough, now what it has led to is this massive side effect, quote, side effect of reducing the risk of falls, which is funnily enough, not the reason we set out to begin with, but that seems to be the biggest impact.
Yeah, there's so much that you just said that I have so much to say about that. The not asking for help thing is huge. We don't people when they have the flu, you don't mind asking your family to, take care of me for a little while, do this for me. It's temporary. In a few days it'll be done and it'll be their turn. They probably have the flu next. So you're going to be repaying that favor. But I see that a lot with my older adults, especially ones with chronic illnesses or, people maybe who are spinal cord patients who will continuously in their life always need help. And those little indignities of having to ask every single time, it wears on them. It really wears on them. And to a point where I have really seen people literally rather go without than have to ask yet again. And it's not even a big deal. They're happy to do it, but it adds up and that caregiver burden adds up as well. They also want to be helpful, but at the same time that's yet another thing that they're needing to do for them. So, yeah,
Yeah,
giving them
can I
independence.
echo a little
Fantastic.
can I echo a little
Please.
story to the point you just made? So one of these interviews was a mom, and I'll never forget what she said. Her exact quote was, "Dhaval, I don't feel disabled because I can't run a marathon. That doesn't make me feel disabled. I feel disabled when I have to call my 12-year-old daughter from the room next door to turn on the light that's 12 steps away from me. That's when I feel disabled." And so it's exactly to your point, right? She wants to feel like a mom and a caregiver, not instead being cared for. And so very much the point you're making.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's all about identity.
Right?
right? It's who you are, your self-efficacy. Can I take care of this on my own? If somebody was not here and they went to go and hang if my caregiver went to have a little bit of self-care time, am I okay? Can I do this for a little period of time? And one of the other points that you made was about effort. And going back to that hotel room discussion we were just talking about, listen, like effort to go there, come back, just to turn on a light, that's huge. And, spinal cord patients are massive. They are massive energy conservation.
Yeah, 100%. They love basically, it's like every sip of water, they think twice, because now
Yeah,
it's gonna be a whole bunch of effort every time you have to go pee. Like, every little
right.
every
It
little decision is
matters.
calculated.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. I mean, really, like they do have a finite amount of energy and they have to spend that energy very, very carefully. And the question in my mind whenever I'm talking to patients is what are the things that you have to do, only you can do, and what are the things that we could outsource to technology, maybe even to somebody else, maybe a caregiver that comes 2 hours in the morning, give them this huge list of things to do that I can't do, but then you can take care of it. It can save my energy in order for me to do the things that are meaningful in my life that make me feel confident and, able to take care of my environment and myself. So, yeah, I so many things that right there and then that we just had to talk about. So, kind of going back to, what clinicians go through when we are talking to people about these kinds of solutions, I wanted to highlight this study that I saw at out of AARP. I love AARP. I talk a lot about this in my book. But they had a study that showed only a year ago that tech adoption was really high in adults with, an average of about 7 devices each, 91% of them having cell phones. The problem I have with this study is their definition of older adults was 50 plus. And I'm telling you, I'm turning 50 in just a few weeks, okay? And I can tell you from in the field experience, my technological readiness, it's not the same as my 70s, 80s, 90s, okay? And maybe even the interest in looking at those as potential solutions is not it's not something that they're interested in, even if I could overcome some of those, infrastructure challenges or other things. So I think it's really important for clinicians to understand that they have like this toolbox that they carry into the home to see clients has to include everything from very dummy proof all the way to those like crazy fancy smart home technology type solutions. And when I think about that, that's where it comes down to our job. This is our job as clinicians to assess that readiness. So, I'm going to say that in those situations when I have people who are not ready to invest in a smart home or they are living in a rental and that's not an option, a clapper is a great solution. Okay. I don't want anybody laughing at the idea that this is old school and remember those commercials. Listen, if it solves the problem and it's functional, I'm all about that. So low tech things can help people, get comfortable with this idea and show how it improves their life. So let's put in those motion detecting lights. Let's put in a clapper. But you know what? Those ones who are ready to embrace a little bit of cool and fun technology, I think the Lotus Ring could be something really interesting for them.
Couldn't agree more. So, in my experience, I've sort of seen, I'll call it, two extremes of solutions, and you kind of touched upon both of them, right? So, there's the super high tech, what I like to call build your own Ferrari solution, where, if you have the time, money, and knowledge, they are fantastic. And these are sort of the smart speakers of the world, right? Like the Alexas, the Google Homes, the Siris. They're amazing if you have the time, money, and know-how, right? Because they require a lot of installation. We can talk more about that. And then there's sort of the other extreme, which are, people shouldn't laugh, but they're quite amazing and helpful, are the clappers of the world or the motion detecting lights. And so I think both extremes have their place. And then there was a need where we felt for above average outcomes with below average complexity. And that was kind
Mm.
of missing. And hopefully, to your point, that's the gap that Lotus fills, which is it's extremely simple. Basically, if you know how to use a TV remote, you can use Lotus. But at the same time, it doesn't have the complexities associated with current home technology, which we can talk about.
And you know what's funny? You just basically put in a nutshell what holistic care is all about. It's the It's the looking at the pros and cons of all these things, throwing in the mix of personal preferences, tech readiness, and all this, and coming out with a solution that is the best solution for that person, that situation, that time, right? Based on time, energy, money, and hassle, all of those things. I'm really kind of curious because you were trying to solve your own problem. So, I'm sure that what you did prior to saying, "Oh, I'm just going to construct this," you probably did an internet search or you did some kind of research in there to find something, maybe off the shelf that you could manufacture or move around to solve that. What did you find? What did you find anything?
Yeah, I found lots of solutions. In fact, there was one, funnily enough, sitting in my own house. So this incident where I fell asleep with the lights on had happened just after Christmas. And so around Christmas, I'd been gifted an Amazon Echo speaker, so smart speakers in
Ah,
general.
right.
And it had been sitting in my home for a while, and I never used it. And so it got me thinking, why is this the case? And so I started studying this domain more. And so, that's the most cutting edge technology that we have today, which is smart speakers controlling your lights and fans and so on. So it turns out there are sort of three complicated steps you need to do for smart speakers to control your home. So the first step is whatever you're trying to control. So in my case, it was my ceiling lights. The first step for me would be to rewire that wall switch that controls that ceiling light. I'd have to take out the old one and rewire it with a new one that connects to the internet to be able to talk to, Alexa or Google or
Okay.
Siri, as the case may be. So that's step one. It's rewiring your home to be connected to the internet to be able to talk to any of these smart speakers, which is complicated. It takes about 11 hours or $2,000. Most people usually get a contractor. If you're an engineer like myself, you'll try and do it yourself. You need to know whether there's a neutral wire in the home. You need to know the wattage of your lights. You need to know where your fuse is. It's quite complicated. And so that's just the first step, which is rewiring your home. Let's say you've done that. You've gone over that hump. Now, step two, you have to put a smart speaker everywhere you just did the rewiring. So you got to put one in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the bathroom. And that's assuming you're okay with the privacy trade-offs because it has to be listening all the time, which the most common concern for older adults seems to be privacy, especially in private rooms like putting a speaker in bedrooms and bathrooms. So that's step two. And then step three, if you've finished step one and step two, you have to set it all up with another app, right? This is what's called pairing. This is kitchen light. This is living room light. This is light number, 23. And by the way, this is all best case if you own your house. If you're renting an apartment, what do you do? And then to your point, Carol, if you did all this and now you're traveling, even if you have a smart home, what do? You can't bring it with you. So it turned out it affects everyone. It just disproportionately affected people with limited mobility, older adults, people with disabilities, and veterans. And so that's what we set out to solve, was having something that was basically a very, very simple to set up and simple to use smart home, but also something that was portable. So that was my starting point when I started looking to solve my own problem.
And you know what I heard you say just now when you were telling us like all the steps? All I could hear were cords, tripping hazards, like battery problems. Like my brain was just fluttering with these things going, no, 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 no. I got more problems here. You're adding more problems to my plate. I can't handle this. And what's funny about it is that, recently Alexa had an upgrade.
Mhm.
And my husband needed like a mental wellness day before he could tackle having to reattach all the apps and do everything. And even still, the day after it happened, I mean, the lights were turning on in the bedroom spontaneously at 2 in the morning, then 4 in the morning, then 6 in the morning. I mean, we were exhausted. I mean, I just couldn't handle it. And I'm thinking in my head, there is no way that my clients are going to be putting up with any of this. So, I mean, that those software hassles and then the cord tripping hazards and then fine, we can say, well, you can just do battery. Well, let me tell you a story. I have Ring cameras all around, and I was out of town for Thanksgiving, and the security company called to say, hey, there's somebody trying to break into your house. And the police came and they're like, well, why don't you just look in the Ring cameras? Well, why do you think that we have no vision for Ring cameras? Because you have to get on a ladder every single time you want to change the batteries
Ah.
that are outside that are not accessible. So, technology is so wonderful in so many ways, but there are some real life hassles that just are not appropriate for older adults.
And the
So
funny thing is,
we
and,
need
and
other solutions.
I couldn't agree more. And the funny thing is, I tried. And part of the reason this was selfish, I've worked at Lutron, so I worked on a specific product. So I said, nope, I'm going to buy one and use it and install it. And so in my entire home, I have a grand total of one smart switch. Because after finishing that one, it took me a while. It took me an hour, I think. I was just too tired. I was like, I'm not doing this everywhere in the house. Yeah, to your point, everything needs to be rewired because it takes power to be connected to the internet all the time, hence the rewiring. Or if it's battery operated, it has no battery life, like your phones or watches that you have to charge every day or every couple of days. And so that was the challenge, which is what happened. Apparently, when I was looking back in time to see why something like this doesn't exist already, the interesting thing is we came to the Clapper. Clapper was sort of state of the art. And then the internet happened. And so instead of looking for ways that are easy for end users, what ended up happening is technology took a turn of what is convenient for engineers to make. Even though completely non-intuitive to set up or to use, it was the easiest, most interesting puzzle for engineers to solve. And so that's what happened.
Wow. That is the opposite of user experience, right?
Indeed. Especially from coming from Apple world, the idea is that you should never require user behavior change. It should be
Oh, I
something that
love that.
users are used to doing already and just fits right into their daily habits, never require user behavior change.
Yeah, it has to be the easy choice. I mean, we talk
Right?
about this all the time in terms of exercise as well. If I give you, 30 exercises that you have to do every single day in a specific way and every single time, I mean, the adoption of that is almost impossible.
Right.
So, trying to look at, well, like what is it that you need and what would give you the most benefit? Those are ways to improve that motivation. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So, I want to kind of bring everything together a little bit in case like people haven't seen your device like on the internet. Can you just kind of talk to us a little bit about what the components are? Because one of the things that I remember the most with seeing, I think I can't remember who it was that was at CES and demo, and he said, "Look, you want to see the installation of this thing?" And he picks up the light cover and he goes, "Tuk," and the magnet just connects right onto the other one. He was like, "There you go, done." And it was just the funniest thing in the world. So please give our listeners an idea, an understanding of just how simple this is, how dummy proof this is, and how, it can still function like a smart home. It's not going to be your smart home, but it's a darn good in between compromise.
Yeah. Thanks, Carol. So in a nutshell, it's a ring that controls objects at home by pointing. But like you mentioned, Carol, there's no app, no rewiring, and no internet. So the way it works is step one, there is a wearable ring. You just put it on most commonly your index finger, although there's no requirement. You can put it on anywhere. And there's a single button on the ring. So most commonly, users push that button with their thumb, but we can talk more about that in a second. So step one, put on the ring. That eliminates the need to put a smart speaker in every room of the house because the ring stays on you and goes with you wherever you go. So that's step one. Step two, for any of your existing wall switches, we have a second half that we call a switch cover, and that just goes on top of your existing wall switches using a magnet. In fact, there's no rewiring. The magnets just connect to the screws that are holding your existing wall switch on the wall. So there's literally no rewiring. In fact, there's not even a correct way to put the switch cover on. It will work either which way. So step two is you just bring the switch cover close to the wall switch and it snaps on using a magnet. I don't know if you can hear the magnet snapping on. Now,
I heard dummy proof. That's what I heard.
yeah. And so now you can continue using the wall switch like you would anyway. You can push the front surface anywhere and you can still use it like a regular wall switch. Or step three, you can push the button on the ring and just point and click. And just like a TV remote, you can point and click to whatever you're trying to control. It will turn on the light or the fan or even the TV. And because it's like a TV remote, it uses infrared. So there's no need for any app or smartphone or even Wi-Fi. Very, very simply, It allows you to convert any space into an accessible space in about 2 seconds. And more importantly, to your point, you can then take it with you wherever you go because it's just magnets and a ring, and that's it.
So I have a question then. What about the proximity of things? So if my TV is pretty close to where my fan is, which a lot of times the fan is in the middle of the room, TV is often in the middle of the room, like how much margin of error is there for people?
It's a great question. So actually, funnily enough, originally we weren't even planning on making a ring. We were thinking everyone's got a TV remote, right? So we'll just make the second half. We'll just make those magnetic switch covers. It turns out that was a good rough idea, but it doesn't actually work. And the reason being TV remotes blast infrared. And so instead of turning on one thing in the room, it had the same problem as the clapper, which is everything turns on and off at the same time. Same problem with the clapper. You can never have two clappers in the same room because both go on and off at the same time. So the ring is in between sort of a laser pointer and a TV remote blasting infrared. I like to describe it as it's like a flashlight. Literally, it's actually like a flashlight, except instead of visible light, it's infrared light. And the reason that's important is A, you don't have to aim. So you're not hunting with the ring. In fact, my dad has Parkinson's. He was our second test user. I was the first. And even with an extremely heavy hand tremor, you can actually push the button and it will control whatever you're roughly pointing towards. So that's point number one. Point number two, any two things, as long as they're separated by about 1 foot, 1.5 feet, only the thing you're roughly pointing towards will turn on and off, and everything else in the room will stay the same. And you can be really far away. You can be as far back as 30 feet. And even then, as long as two things are separated by at least a foot, foot and a half, only the thing you're roughly pointing towards will turn on and off, and everything else will stay the same.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Have you tried this for outdoor use?
Yeah. Actually, the funny thing is we've been doing constant pilots. So we're on pilot number 4. The last one was commissioned by the state of New York. And every single time, users manage to surprise us with how they've managed to use these devices. So the current most new things, one has been a fireplace, where people have been turning on and off their fireplace because it was controlled by a wall switch. The second was an old school gramophone. It's one of those, you put the
Mhm.
LPs on them, and they hadn't been able to turn it on and off because it was a manual and was close to the floor. Now they're using their ring to turn it on and off. And the third, to your point, is outdoor lights, specifically during the holidays, where usually by the end of the evening, you want to turn on your holiday lights that you've set up or your Christmas tree lights. It's cold outside, it's wet, depending on where you are. It might be raining or snowing. And so a lot of our users, especially the ones upstate, like in New York, they've been using it, funnily enough, to turn on and off their Christmas lights. And so that's been very, very common. We constantly get surprised by how people have been using it. In fact, the very first thing that surprised us, we assumed that you need line of sight. And in the very first pilot, the first thing that we were surprised by is it turns out infrared will bounce. Infrared will curve around corners and bounce. And so people were starting to use it to control their bathroom lights without being in the bathroom. And so funnily
Huh.
enough, that was the very first learning we had, which is you don't need line of sight. But at the same time, now you have all these other use cases. Now, you still can't control your neighbor's lights, just like you can't control your neighbor's TV, because infrared won't penetrate a solid wall or a solid floor. But within your home, you don't need line of sight, which is quite cool.
But you just said the magic word. I mean, we could have just stopped right there with, you can control the light, turn on the light in the bathroom when you're laying in bed with the ring on your hand,
Yep.
right? Because, this is a struggle that we go through a lot with clients who don't want to wake up the spouse and but they still need to get there. They need to get to the bathroom to be able to turn on the light so that they can get there safely. So, yeah, I feel like that solves a lot of big problems. And I wonder about a use case since you're about to have a child of your own that clinicians, we very much value teaching our children to be independent early. That's why I'm a Montessori mom. I sit back and I let them struggle because I know, just like my patients, they're going to get better the more that they do on their own and the more agency that they feel that they did it on their own. So I'm wondering, have you tried rings for little kids, for the pediatric population maybe? There are a lot of clinicians who may not just be seeing older adults. Maybe they do treat kids. Maybe they treat kids who are nonverbal, who, can't use Alexas to be able to turn things on and off. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So actually, in our pilot number 3, which was commissioned by the state of New York, our original goal, in fact, the state of New York's goal, was to give it to 3 sets of populations. It was their Department of Aging, which is older adults, Department of Disability for people with disabilities to do independent living, and then the third was Department of Veterans Affairs for injured veterans. As it turned out, they went beyond that to multiple other populations, which has now been a surprise to us. So close to 100% of people at the end of the pilot, this was a 3-month-long pilot. At the end, close to 100%, I think it was 100%, 100%, and 98%, recommended it for those 3 populations, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. What was new, though, to your point, is now it is also being recommended to anyone living in a rental apartment, anyone with low vision, sort of glaucoma, cataracts, macular degeneration. And the third, and very surprising to us, funnily enough, because it's come full circle, is pregnant moms and new dad. And the reason for this is both prenatal and postnatal, right? So prenatal, second, third trimester, literally getting from a seated position is literally a pain in the back. So it's a sit to stand transfer, an STS. But post-delivery, you're recovering. And then funnily enough, the situation that gets referenced the most is after your baby has fallen asleep in your arms. Oftentimes for moms, it's after breastfeeding. For dads, it might be after like a diaper change. Now that after the baby's fallen asleep in your arms, now you're stuck. You can't yell for help because the baby might wake up. You can't move your arms and you can't get up. But you can very quietly push the button on your finger and turn off the lights or turn on the fan and so on. So close to 100% of people also recommended it for those 3 populations. And then to your point, 2 other populations also came up. Not close to 100%, it was close to 90% recommendation. So one was anyone with atypical speech or atypical hearing. So this is for the speech therapists out there. So anyone that's deaf or hard of hearing or nonverbal, to your point, they significantly loved this. Again, it was a 90% recommendation, not as high as the others that I was talking about. And then for anyone with intellectual and developmental disabilities or special needs population, the recommendation rate was 85%. So it's quite high. And it was the first time ever that we've given it to anyone with IDD, autism, Down syndrome. So we were, if I'm being completely vulnerable and honest, I really wasn't sure if it was a good idea. And we worked with a wonderful organization called ADAPT. They're in upstate New York. And they convinced us, saying, just trust us, it's going to help them. Because they know how to use a TV remote, we are confident they will be able to use this. And I was skeptical. And after 3 months, I have to say, I was happily proven wrong, where I was really terrified that, something bad might happen or they may not know how to use it. And man, I was really glad to be wrong. They loved it.
I think that's amazing. And, yeah, moms, listen, I can attest with personal experience that when it takes 45 minutes to get a baby to sleep, you are so angry if somebody even just slams the door the wrong way in a different part of the house. So
Yeah.
there is no way I'm telling, my voice assistant anything if I finally got that kid to sleep. One of the things that I think is interesting too is, my parents are immigrants and, they cannot control the Alexas in my house. And, they don't even have that big of an accent. They've lived in the West for 40 some years, but it makes me laugh every time that they come over and they just cannot get it to work. It is just like that YouTube, the Saturday, what is that?
The Saturday Night
There are a
Live
couple,
spoofs,
yeah,
yeah.
that's it. There's a spoof on it. It's so true. But like, after you get past the funny part of it, you realize, look, but they're still not able to appreciate or use some of those neat tools. So I'm really kind of wondering, this could be a great present for my parents, definitely in that situation. But has accents been something that
Oh,
people have mentioned
100%.
to you?
In
Okay.
fact, I would say your intuition was way more accurate than mine. So in addition to many other questions we asked as part of the pilot, one of the questions, despite our users loving Lotus, we still went sort of above and beyond and said, well, okay, even though you like Lotus, what if you didn't have this? Why don't you consider using, Alexa or Google or Siri, like smart speakers in general? And
Hmm.
so we had 4 reasons that were given why people actively chose not to use any of these smart speakers. And to your point, The number one reason, and statistically was 90%, we did 85 interviews, so it's 90%, specified Alexa doesn't understand me or I don't understand it. And the biggest reason in those were either accents or having a speech impairment or just not giving the command correctly. In fact, for older adults, funnily enough, funny, not so funny, was a lot of times they would call it Alexis and it wouldn't
Right.
understand them, or it was an accent, or the command wasn't given exactly the way, the smart speaker is expecting it. And this is, by the way, I say Alexa because it's very popular, but this applies to Alexa, Google Home, Siri, all three of them.
Right. Right.
But the idea was 90% of the interviewees said that they chose not to use existing smart speaker technology because accents or not understanding the commands or speech impairment or being deaf or hard of hearing
Or memory. I
or
mean,
memory.
it drives me crazy if I can't remember what my husband programmed it. So when he had to reprogram the
Right.
whole house, he changed slightly the variation. So instead of saying, I think we chose living room or dining room or something, he chose a different word. And so after 7 or 8 years of living with me thinking that that's what it's called, now it doesn't work. And it's frustrating, it's a hassle, and I can't even imagine how that would affect an older adult who's, trying to remember all those things with all the other things that they're thinking about. Just all the medication lists, and the cognitive load is so huge already. Do we need to make it even more complicated
And
with having to also remember what it's called?
absolutely. And this is a common issue, by the way. So, for instance, Carol, if you got a smart speaker and I got the exact same brand of smart speaker, it doesn't help you at all, right? Because my speaker only works for me in my home. Your speaker only works for you in your home. And to your point, even if you took it to somebody else's home, let's say you brought it to my home, it wouldn't work.
Right.
And so the idea was we wanted to make something that was more like a telephone. The more people that had it, the more beneficial every person's device keeps becoming. And that's what the infrared technology allows. You can take the Ring to your dad's home and your Ring will automatically continue working. You can literally walk in through the door and control his television, no change. And if he came to your home, his Ring would automatically continue working. Infrared has been around for so long, it's universal. And so that's part of the reason why we chose infrared as a baseline technology. It's funny, we like to call it old tech, new tech. It has all the benefits of being simple, power efficient. We just changed the form factor to make it usable with one hand without looking at whatever you're trying to control, without the need for any app or rewiring or internet.
Yeah, well, you're upcycling. This is
Yeah,
something that
exactly.
I love. I love this. I right now there's a whole push on longevity drugs and looking at like old drugs and what other uses could we use them for. I mean, anything that we can use that doesn't take in more resources for R&D and all these things. Like, why aren't we maximizing out those areas? So I wanted to touch on something that I think people will think about. Rings, we think about fingers. And I love that you have a video that dispels this myth. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing this the human-centered design experience has taught me is to not make assumptions. And yet I still constantly make these assumptions. So to your point, we were at a conference, a disability conference called NCIL, NCIL. It's a well-known one in the community in the space if people are aware of it. And so we had this lady, wonderful lady, who was born with no shoulders, as in no arms, and she was sort of her arms end at the shoulders. And she was using power wheelchair and sort of coming over to our booth. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what am I gonna tell this lady? It's like because you need fingers, and I can clearly tell she has no arms. And funnily enough, without even asking me, she just automatically used her toes to pick up the Ring and push the button and started using it. And we're talking seconds, right? It's in the video. If you've seen the video, it's in the video. She just sort of rolls up to the booth, picks up the Ring, and starts using it. And I am so shocked. Instead of sort of talking about the usual, which is, how the technology works and the usual, because that's the common question that people have. I'm in reverse interviewing her, which is, how did you start using it? Is it easy? Are you able to push the button? How did you know there was a button and all this? And in short, basically, she told me, saying, she just felt around. She could feel the button. She squeezed her toes and she could point and click. And that was it. And so I think I'm repeatedly realizing I have all these preconceived notions about who can and can't use the tech. And really, we've realized if it's simple enough that if you know how to use a TV remote, you can use it. And if you can push the button however you can, it doesn't have to be using your thumb. So for a lot of our quadriplegics, they don't have fine motor control. They use gross motor control. So they push their one hand against the other hand. It just went off. You can push it against your other hand, or wheelchair users will push against their knee or the wheelchair itself. We have a lot of wheelchair users will wear gloves. This is not like a smart health ring, so it doesn't have to touch the surface of your skin to work. As long as you can push the button however you like, it works. And so I had all these preconceived notions, which is, someone without arms can't use it. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I assumed, anyone with intellectual and developmental disabilities, this would not be good for. So I'm happy to say I was very, very wrong. And so this person's name was Olivia. Olivia was wonderfully proven me wrong that you don't need arms. So that was the video that you were talking about.
I love that. I think it's so interesting. And you're talking to a bunch of clinicians here. And clinicians always believe that you can do anything. And we recognize that hands are toes, basically. Just we use them differently.
Yeah.
And I heard Peter Attia talking about he coined it toe yoga, which I've heard about it in classes before. So I've done continuing education classes where you have they make you take off your socks and you're trying to do this challenge of trying to lift up your toes and keep your little toes down. Raise your big toe, keep your little toes down, and then reverse, and then spread them and do things. And until somebody actually asks you to do these things, you're thinking in your head, "What are you talking about? My toes work like a mitten. They don't work like gloves."
Right.
They don't have individual control, but they really do. And you can teach it to do that. And, we are a body made up of muscles, and we as clinicians, we can figure out what exercises we need to give that patient to work on what muscles, as long as we know where we're going. What's the goal? What are we trying to do here? So I love what Olivia is doing. She's like, look, I just want to be independent. And
Yeah.
I have toes. Well, I don't have hands. I have toes. This is what I have to work with. Here are my parameters. And look, it makes no difference at all. And I love that she just inspired a whole bunch of people who maybe had, not even thought that was a possibility for her. And
Yeah, and to your
fascinating.
point, the other sort of category of people that we didn't think it would be good for was, you mentioned kids earlier. We weren't sure. And so in general, we've only been focusing on 18 plus adults. And for us, everything is evidence based. It has to be part of, it's sort of the corollary to human centered design. Don't make assumptions, but confirm everything, confirm efficacy. And what we've been learning since is parents have now been using it with their children, especially for night terrors. And
Mm.
interestingly enough, to correct bedwetting behavior, which was a total surprise to us. We still don't have enough, I would say, not statistically significant data, so I don't want to make any claims. But funnily enough, anecdotally, it's been coming up repeatedly, which is this would have been great for my mom. In one of our interviews, he mentioned that towards the end of her, towards end of life, she had sort of cancer in the fluid of her brain. So she had all these psychosomatic symptoms. She was terrified of the dark. We hear about this from PTSD veterans. They just want to be able to turn on the light when they wake up from a nightmare. And we're hearing sort of on the other end of the spectrum, it's quite true for kids, which is just having this sort of, quote, magic ring to turn on the lights and sort of dispel the monsters, if you will, is actually somehow, funnily enough, correcting bedwetting behavior. Makes a lot of
I
sense in hindsight, but we'd never thought about it.
That's amazing. I love that. And actually, you just started like all the wheels turning in my head because that's the greatest thing about simple solutions, honestly, because they go out in the world and you can adapt them to all these different use cases and stuff that you can just think up on the fly because it's not complicated and it wasn't necessarily developed to solve one little problem. And one thing that you said just now was about the control aspect of it. Like kids need control, teaching them that they can control their bladders, that they can control the scary feelings and calm themselves down and recognize there are no monsters in the closet. Look, I turned on the light and there's nothing in the closet. Kind of reminds me of older adults with pain control, like that they give
Yeah.
the ones where you give morphine drips where they are in control of that, they take less pain medicine than they do if somebody were to give it to them. But the most important part of it is that you develop this peace and this ability to control your own environment. And it's just you can't even put a price on that kind of thing. It's amazing.
It's absolutely true. The freedom feeling comes from the ability to make your own choices, is what we've learned.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing. Well, listen, we have talked about a ton of ideas, and I wanted to get your opinion about like how could a clinician decide like which solution is the right thing for them, and in which cases would Lotus not be something that would be appropriate for them? Help us make that decision.
Yeah, let me start with who Lotus might not be good for. So, in the 85 interviews that I talked about in the previous pilot, there were sort of two use cases that popped up where maybe it may not be the best choice. So, the obvious one is someone that has no ability to push a button. Now, the button force threshold has been intentionally set to be just above 100 grams. So, my expertise is human interface. About 85 grams is a threshold for a false click. You can just accidentally push the button. So, we've set it to about 120 grams, just a slightly higher. So, it's very, very soft, very easy. But we do have a lot of users some subset of users that have no ability to push the button anyway. So these are users for whom I would recommend a sort of sip and puff type solution where they have no ability either through their arms or legs or any way to even depress the button on the ring. For them, I don't know if Lotus is the best solution. That's one. Interestingly enough, we did meet a gentleman as part of this pilot number 3, the New York pilot, who has no wall switches in his entire home. His home was built in the 1800s. It's some sort of a colonial home, really, really old. He had no wall switches. And so for him, again, because we do these switch covers that physically push your button, push your wall switch, or flip your wall switch. If you don't have any wall switches at home, maybe Lotus is not the right solution. And then there's a third category, which I'm not going to say it's not good for them yet, because as I've been proven wrong multiple times, I'm just going to say I don't have the data to recommend it to this category yet, which is for anyone with dementia or Alzheimer's. We haven't tested it yet, so I don't have clinical data or pilot data to prove that it is good for them. So I would say the jury's still out on that group of people. Anyone with dementia, Alzheimer's, we don't know yet. And so I would say, those are maybe 3 common categories that come to mind. Anyone that can't push the button at all, someone that doesn't have any wall switches at home to begin with, and then the third TBD category is dementia and Alzheimer's. So for those 3 categories, I would say maybe Lotus is not yet the best solution. And your other question was, how do you help decide sort of, what is a good solution? I would say that the general rule is try and match the level of complexity to the end user. So if they have time, money, and the knowledge, honestly, go for smart stuff. Go for smart home stuff. Go for smart speakers. If they have the time and the money and the know-how to set it up themselves, it really is a fantastic solution. It can do a lot. You can control it when you're not at home. There's all these benefits, but acknowledge that the barrier to entry is high. And it's usually one of these 3 things. It's the time to set it up, or the complexity, or the money, or just the engineering know-how needed to set it up. Now, if it's not that, you could go the other extreme, which is to go for the really, really simple solutions. You don't get as much payoff, but it is very, very simple. These are the motion lights, or this might be the clap, or something to that degree. For everybody else, I would say sort of solutions like ours, where it's in between, where it's above average outcome with below average complexity, that might be a better fit. So I guess the short version is tailor the complexity of the solution to the end user, instead of just looking at sort of what's been marketed. Look at how easy is it to set up, how easy is it to use, and does it require behavior modification?
I love that. That's it's very easy for us to understand how to be able to pick these solutions. I think that was very well laid out. I tell you, this was a crazy, enlightening conversation. And I'm sad that we probably don't have time to talk too much about case studies, but I do know that I have seen a lot of testimonials floating around on YouTube. So, clinicians can go and like watch them because, seeing their faces and how excited they are that they are doing things for themselves, that's something that we can't explain on a podcast anyway. So I'm going to say, go ahead, watch all the videos, see what you think. And, let's just kind of at least provide some takeaways for the clinicians. What are those top three things that you want clinicians to remember to guide their practice for tomorrow?
So if you're working with older adults, their number one concern, especially was part of our pilot, number 2 overall and number 1 for older adults is the solution private? Privacy was their number one concern. So ask yourself, is the solution that you're recommending to your end patient, Is it private? That's number one. Number two, instead of only thinking about how easy it is to use, think about the setup. How easy is this for my patient to set up for themselves, by themselves, and not even rely on family members who may not live nearby? So that's number two. And then the last question, which we tend to think of first, is yes, how easy is it to use? But the real test there is there behavior change required? And usually an easy checkoff list is, does it need an app? Does it need Wi-Fi? Or does it need rewiring? And those are easy ways to check if behavior modification is necessary or new learning is necessary. Because sometimes it seems like something's easy, but really if you're going to have to find your phone, unlock your phone, find the app, pick this specific device, it's not as easy as it may seem. So those are my three. Is it private? How easy is it to set up? And really, truly, how easy is it to use if it needs an app or Wi-Fi?
I love it. That's a great summary. Very easy to remember and easy for us to at least get started on there. So, how can people reach you if they want to learn more or have questions?
So email is the best way to get a hold of me, or LinkedIn or messaging. So my name is Dhaval. That's DHAVAL @getlotus.com. Or if that's hard to remember, you can always email us at hello@getlotus.com. Either one works.
You know what? The simpler, the better. It's always the
Exactly.
answer. Always the answer.
Exactly.
Well, it's all the time that we have for today. Thanks again to Dhaval Patel for the insight and takeaways related to alternatives to smart home technology. And before we go, just a quick reminder that this episode is intended for educational purposes only and does not represent an endorsement of any specific company or product. We reference types of solutions, but they are there to inform clinical decision making and not to promote specific brands. Thanks for tuning in to this episode, and I hope to see you all again next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to Innovative Aging by MedBridge. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, your favorite podcast platform, or listen directly at medbridge.com. If you'd like to earn continuing education credit and access bonus resources from this episode, just log in to your MedBridge account and search for the show title to get started. And we'd love to hear from you. If there's a topic you want us to explore or a guest you'd love to hear from, reach out via Instagram or email us at podcasts@medbridge.com. Thank you for the work you do and for joining us as we explore what it truly means to age in place. See you next time.